A homeless Navy SEAL followed his dog's frantic warning to a mountain castle and uncovered a secret buried for 50 years. A homeless Navy SEAL's dog led him to a mountain castle and found what they hid inside. After losing his wife, his ranch, and nearly his will to keep going, former Navy SEAL Jack Mercer survives in Montana's frozen wilderness with only his retired military K9 Shadow. But when Shadow leads him through a blizzard toward a mysterious castle hidden above the clouds, they uncover a secret that powerful people spent decades trying to keep buried, and a truth that will change Jack's life forever. Comment 1 if you'd follow your dog's instincts, or 0 if you'd turn back, and tell us where you're watching from. The wind arrived before the snow. It came down from the high peaks of Montana's Bitterroot Mountains like a living thing, cold enough to cut through layers of clothing and sharp enough to make even the tallest pines groan in protest. Jack Mercer pulled the collar of his weathered canvas jacket higher around his neck and stared into the small campfire flickering beneath a rocky overhang. The flames were weak. So was everything else. 11 months earlier, Jack had owned a ranch. A modest place. Nothing fancy. Just a stretch of land his wife Hannah had loved, with a white fence, a red barn, and a porch where they used to sit together and watch sunsets paint the mountains gold. Now the ranch belonged to the bank. The barn belonged to strangers, and Hannah belonged to memories. Jack rubbed his hands together near the fire. Across from him lay the only soul who had stayed. Shadow. The retired military German shepherd lifted his head from the blanket of pine needles and watched Jack with intelligent amber eyes. The dog was getting older. Gray fur had begun appearing around his muzzle. A scar crossed one shoulder from a deployment years earlier. But nothing about him looked weak. Even now, every movement carried the calm confidence of a veteran who had survived things most people could never imagine. Jack managed a tired smile. "You still judging my fire-building skills, buddy?" Shadow's ears twitched. The dog's tail thumped once against the ground. That was enough of an answer. For a few minutes, neither moved. The mountains settled into darkness around them. Snow clouds rolled across the sky. The temperature dropped. The wilderness became silent. Too silent. Jack had never liked silence. Not since the war. Silence often became memories, and memories became nightmares. A sudden crack from a nearby tree branch made his muscles tighten instantly. His heart began racing. His breathing shortened. For one brief second, he wasn't in Montana anymore. He was thousands of miles away. Dust, gunfire, smoke, screams. The familiar panic started crawling into his chest. Then something warm pressed against his arm. Shadow. The dog had moved without a command, without a word, without hesitation. Jack placed a hand on the shepherd's neck. Slowly, the panic faded, as it always did. "You always know," Jack whispered. Shadow looked up at him. The bond between them needed no explanation. The dog had saved his life overseas, more than once, and ever since Hannah's death, Shadow had been saving it here too. A distant rumble echoed across the mountains. Thunder. The storm was arriving faster than expected. Snowflakes began drifting through the darkness. Large, heavy, relentless. Jack tossed another piece of firewood onto the flames. "We'll ride it out." Shadow didn't react. That was unusual. Very unusual. The German shepherd had suddenly become rigid. His ears pointed toward the mountain ridge above them. Every muscle in his body tightened. Jack followed his gaze. Nothing. Only darkness and falling snow. Shadow? The dog stood. His nose lifted into the air. He sniffed once, twice, then again. The expression in his eyes changed. Jack had seen that look before. Not during hunting trips. Not during camping. Not during ordinary life. Only during missions. Only when Shadow had detected something important. Something dangerous. Something nobody else could see. The shepherd released a low whine, then another. Jack frowned. "What is it, boy?" Shadow stepped away from the fire. The wind howled harder. Snow thickened. Visibility shrank. Every instinct told Jack that nothing living should be climbing a mountain tonight. Yet Shadow took another step uphill, then another, then another. "Shadow!" The dog stopped briefly, looked back, and for the first time in years ignored a direct command. Jack stared. Shadow never ignored commands, not unless something mattered more. The German shepherd turned and began climbing the ridge. Jack cursed under his breath. "Seriously?" The dog kept moving. Snow gathered on his fur. The darkness swallowed him almost immediately. Jack grabbed his backpack, the rifle he carried for protection, his flashlight. Then he kicked dirt over the fire. "You're lucky I trust you." The climb was brutal. Wind slammed into them from the mountains. Snow whipped across their faces. Loose rocks shifted beneath Jack's boots. Several times he nearly lost sight of Shadow entirely. But the shepherd never slowed, never hesitated. It was as if he knew exactly where he was going. Higher, higher, higher. Nearly an hour passed. Jack's legs burned, his lungs ached. The storm intensified. Then Shadow suddenly stopped. The dog stood frozen at the crest of the ridge, his silhouette barely visible against the swirling white darkness. Jack climbed the final few yards. "What in God's name are you?" The words died in his throat. The mountain opened before him. Beyond the ridge, beyond the storm, beyond anything that should have existed. Atop a distant peak stood a castle. A real castle. Massive stone towers pierced the snowfall. Ancient walls stretched across the mountain summit. Dark spires rose into the clouds like something torn from another century. Lightning flashed somewhere far away. For a brief moment, the entire structure illuminated against the storm. Then darkness returned. Jack couldn't breathe. He blinked once, twice. Certain exhaustion was playing tricks on him. But the castle remained. Silent. Immovable. Impossible. "What?" His voice barely emerged. The Bitterroot Mountains were wild, remote, untamed. But they did not contain medieval castles. At least they weren't supposed to. Shadow stepped beside him. The dog's eyes never left the distant structure. Another flash of lightning illuminated the mountain. This time Jack noticed something else. A faint light. Near one of the towers. Not firelight. Electric light. Someone was there. Someone was living inside that impossible castle. A cold sensation traveled down Jack's spine. The storm no longer felt like the most dangerous thing in the mountains. Beside him, Shadow released a low growl. Not fear, not aggression. Recognition. As if somewhere deep inside, the dog already understood that the castle was more than an abandoned building, more than a mystery, more than a coincidence. And for reasons neither of them yet understood, it had been waiting for them. The snow continued to fall. The castle stood silent above the clouds. And for the first time in 11 months, Jack Mercer felt something stronger than grief. He felt purpose. He just didn't know yet that following Shadow toward that mountain would change everything. Forever. The storm followed them all the way back down the ridge. Snow swirled through the darkness like white ghosts, chasing them through the Bitterroot wilderness. Jack kept glancing over his shoulder as they descended, half expecting the castle to vanish. It didn't. Even through the storm, he could still see its distant silhouette standing atop the mountain, waiting, watching. By the time they reached the shelter of their rocky campsite, the fire had long since died. The cold settled into Jack's bones. Shadow circled twice before lying down beside him beneath the overhang. But unlike every other night, the German shepherd didn't sleep. His eyes remained fixed toward the mountain, toward the castle. Jack noticed. "You're still thinking about it too, huh?" Shadow's ears twitched. The dog never looked away. Jack leaned against the stone wall and wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. Sleep should have come easily after the climb. Instead, his mind refused to rest. The castle, the light in the tower, the impossible location. Nothing made sense. Eventually, exhaustion pulled him under, and the nightmares returned. The desert sun, the smell of burning fuel, the sound of distant explosions. Jack was back overseas, running, searching, trying to reach a convoy trapped under enemy fire. Dust filled the air. Voices screamed through radios. Then came the blast, a violent flash of light, a pressure wave, chaos. His team scattered, someone yelling his name, another explosion, then silence. The kind of silence that always came after tragedy. Jack woke violently. His heart hammered against his ribs. His breathing came in short gasps. Sweat soaked his shirt despite the freezing temperature. For several terrifying seconds, he couldn't remember where he was. The mountains, the storm, the campsite. None of it felt real. Only the fear felt real. Only the panic. A warm weight pressed against his chest. Shadow. The dog had already moved beside him. The shepherd placed his head across Jack's lap, grounding him, anchoring him, pulling him back to reality. Jack lowered his shaking hand onto the dog's neck. "It's okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure whether he was talking to Shadow or himself. Slowly, the panic attack loosened its grip. The stars had emerged above the mountains. The storm had finally passed. Moonlight painted the snow-covered wilderness silver. Everything looked peaceful. Yet Jack felt exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. The kind of exhaustion that came from carrying grief too long. He stared into the darkness and thought about Hannah. 18 months. That was how long she had been gone. Sometimes it felt like yesterday. Sometimes it felt like another lifetime. He could still remember the first day they met. A county fair. A spilled cup of lemonade. An awkward conversation. A smile that somehow changed everything. She had been the one person capable of reaching parts of him the military never could. She understood his silence, accepted his scars, loved him despite the nightmares. When doctors discovered the illness, they had both believed they could fight it. For a while they did. Hospitals, treatments, specialists, hope. Then more treatments, more bills, more bad news. Eventually the ranch became collateral. Then savings disappeared. Then retirement funds. Then everything else. Jack had sold piece after piece of his life trying to save hers, and he would have done it again. Every single time. The memory tightened his chest. The mountains remained silent around him. Shadow shifted closer. Jack smiled sadly. "She loved you, you know." The German shepherd looked up. "Probably more than she loved me some days." The dog's tail thumped softly against the snow. For the first time that night, Jack laughed. A quiet laugh, a broken laugh, but a real one. The stars continued shining overhead, and somewhere in the distance stood the castle. By morning the sky had turned crystal blue, Fresh snow covered the mountains. Sunlight sparkled across endless white slopes. The world looked untouched, clean, beautiful, as if pain had never existed. Jack packed their camp. They moved lower into the valley where a frozen creek wound through pine forests. The day passed quietly, yet something had changed. Shadow's behavior. The German shepherd seemed distracted. Several times he stopped walking altogether, standing motionless, looking toward the mountain, listening, watching, waiting. At first Jack dismissed it. Then it happened again, and again. By afternoon, even he couldn't ignore it anymore. "What is it, boy?" Shadow stared toward the distant peak. The castle remained visible between breaks in the trees. The dog released a low whine. Not fear, not anxiety. Something else, something deeper, as if he sensed unfinished business. That evening they reached an abandoned ranger shelter near the edge of the forest. The structure was old but solid. Its weathered logs offered protection from the cold. Jack repaired the broken door, gathered firewood, started another fire. Normal routine. Normal survival. Yet all night Shadow sat near the doorway, watching the mountain, refusing to relax. Hours passed. The fire crackled softly. Wind rattled the cabin walls. Still Shadow remained alert. Finally Jack walked over and sat beside him. Together they looked toward the distant silhouette. The castle seemed different at night. More mysterious. More alive. Moonlight illuminated portions of its walls. One of the towers appeared almost luminous against the darkness. Then Jack saw it. A tiny point of light. Far away. Near the upper section of the structure. Not moonlight. Not reflection. An actual light. Someone was there. Someone had switched it on. His pulse quickened. The light disappeared, then reappeared, then vanished again. Almost like a signal. Jack frowned. The wilderness surrounding the castle stretched for miles. No roads, no towns, no obvious reason for anyone to live there. Yet someone clearly did. Beside him Shadow stood. The dog's ears locked forward. Every muscle tightened. The same posture he had taken before missions. The same posture he used when danger approached. Jack suddenly remembered something. Years ago, during a deployment, Shadow had detected an ambush before anyone else. The dog had reacted exactly like this. Focused, silent, certain. The realization sent a chill through him. Shadow wasn't fascinated by the castle. He was concerned about it. The difference mattered. A lot. Jack studied the mountain one last time. Questions filled his mind. Who lived there? Why hide in the wilderness? Why had Shadow reacted so strongly? And why did he feel as though the castle somehow connected to something larger? Something waiting beneath the surface. Something buried. The fire crackled behind them. The stars turned slowly overhead. And far away, atop the lonely mountain peak, the castle stood motionless against the night sky. A monument to secrets. A monument to forgotten history. A monument that was somehow pulling both man and dog toward it. Neither of them knew it yet. But the answers they were seeking would begin with a climb. And that climb would lead them deeper into mystery than either could imagine. The next morning dawned clear and cold. A pale winter sun hung above the Bitterroot Mountains, casting long shadows across the snow-covered valleys. Frost coated every pine branch. The world seemed frozen in perfect stillness. Jack Mercer stood outside the ranger shelter and adjusted the straps on his backpack. His eyes were fixed on the distant peak. The castle was visible again. Even in daylight, it looked impossible. The stone towers rose above the surrounding wilderness like something abandoned by time itself. Snow clung to the walls. Dark windows stared across the mountains. Nothing about it belonged there. Yet it was real. Shadow stood beside him. The German shepherd's attention remained locked on the mountain. The dog had barely slept. Several times during the night, Jack had awakened to find Shadow sitting at the doorway, silently watching the distant castle. It wasn't normal behavior, not even for a military working dog. "You really want to go up there, don't you?" Shadow glanced toward him briefly, then looked back at the mountain. That was answer enough. Jack sighed. "All right, partner." He shouldered his pack. "Let's find out what you're trying to tell me." They started climbing shortly after sunrise. At first, the route was manageable. A narrow game trail wound through dense pine forest. Snow crunched beneath their boots and paws. Sunlight filtered through the trees in brilliant golden shafts. The air smelled clean, fresh, peaceful. Yet beneath that beauty, Jack felt a growing sense of unease. The mountain seemed too quiet. No birds, no squirrels, no signs of normal wildlife activity. Just silence. The kind of silence that always made his military instincts uncomfortable. Shadow noticed it too. The shepherd moved ahead of him with careful precision. Every few minutes he stopped, listened, tested the air, then continued. The higher they climbed, the stranger things became. Near noon, they reached a rocky overlook. Jack paused to catch his breath. Then he saw something that immediately erased any remaining doubts. Tire tracks. Fresh tire tracks. They cut directly through the snow. Wide. Deep. Recent. Jack crouched beside them. His fingers brushed the frozen impressions. Not old. Not abandoned. Someone had driven up this mountain within the last few days. Maybe even within hours. A chill crawled through him. There were no public roads up here. No tourist attractions. No nearby communities. Yet heavy vehicles were clearly accessing the area. "Well," he muttered, "that answers one question." Shadow sniffed the tracks. His ears flattened slightly. The dog's body language immediately changed. Tension, alertness, concern. Jack recognized it instantly. Something about the scent bothered him. They continued upward. The trail became steeper, rockier. Several sections required climbing over fallen timber and navigating narrow ledges where one bad step could send someone tumbling down the mountainside. Clouds drifted below them now. The valley disappeared beneath a sea of white. The castle grew larger with every mile. Its scale became easier to appreciate. Massive stone walls, 4 primary towers, a central structure dominating the peak. Whoever built it had possessed enormous resources and a reason for choosing isolation. By early afternoon, Shadow froze. The German shepherd's entire body stiffened. Jack stopped immediately. Years of training had conditioned him to trust the dog without hesitation. "What is it?" Shadow stared toward a dense cluster of trees ahead. His nose lifted, testing the air. Jack slowly reached for the binoculars hanging from his neck. He scanned the area. Nothing. Then movement. Something metallic caught the sunlight. Jack focused. His stomach tightened. A camera, hidden among the branches. Small, well concealed, modern. The lens pointed directly at the trail. Watching, recording, tracking. Jack lowered the binoculars. "That's not good." Shadow released a low growl, the first growl Jack had heard since the castle appeared. Someone had installed surveillance equipment on a remote mountain trail. That wasn't normal. It wasn't harmless either. Jack studied the camera. Professional installation. Weatherproof housing. External power source. Whoever maintained it expected it to remain operational year-round, which meant regular maintenance. regular visitors, regular activity. The mystery was becoming more complicated, not less. They avoided the camera and continued climbing. Soon, more signs appeared. A buried electrical cable emerging briefly from beneath the snow, a utility box mounted behind a rock formation, fresh footprints crossing a ridge. Every discovery raised new questions, and every question seemed connected to the castle. Hours later, they reached the upper slopes. The wind strengthened. Clouds drifted across the mountain. Visibility shifted constantly between crystal clear and nearly opaque. Then Shadow stopped again. This time his reaction was different. Not concern, not caution. Focus. The dog stared toward a break in the trees. Jack followed his gaze, and finally saw the castle up close. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. The structure dominated the mountain summit. Weathered stone walls stretched across the ridge like a fortress from another age. Huge towers rose into the clouds. Narrow windows lined the upper levels. Ancient battlements crowned the walls. It looked less like a building and more like a kingdom hidden above the world. Snow covered portions of the roof. Icicles hung from stone ledges. The sheer scale of it seemed impossible. Yet another detail immediately shattered the illusion of age. A power line. It ran along one section of the outer wall. Modern. Functional. Visible. Jack narrowed his eyes. Then he spotted another. And another. The castle might look ancient, but someone had modernized it. Recently. The contradiction made his skin crawl. Shadow moved forward slowly. His ears remained upright, every sense fully engaged. The closer they approached, the stronger his reactions became. Suddenly he stopped beside a large boulder. The dog sniffed intensely, then pawed at the snow. Jack walked over. Beneath the fresh snowfall lay something unexpected, a cigarette butt, recently discarded, still partially dry. Someone had been standing there not long ago, watching the approach, watching the mountain, watching anyone who came near. Jack stared toward the castle. The feeling returned, that sensation he used to experience before missions, the awareness that unseen eyes might already be tracking his movements. Old instincts awakened, threat assessment, escape routes, observation points, defensive positions. His SEAL training automatically began cataloging everything. The mountain no longer felt abandoned. It felt occupied. Shadow suddenly turned toward the castle and released a short bark. One bark, sharp, purposeful, then silence. Jack frowned. The dog rarely barked without reason, especially not in unfamiliar territory. "What do you see?" Shadow didn't answer. Instead, he stared toward one of the upper towers. Jack followed his gaze. At first, he noticed nothing. Then he saw movement. A figure, barely visible, standing in a distant window, watching them. The silhouette remained motionless for only a second, then vanished. Gone. Jack's pulse quickened. Someone was definitely there. Someone knew they had arrived. The realization settled heavily between man and dog. The mystery was no longer theoretical, no longer distant. It had become personal. Shadow stepped closer to Jack's side. The shepherd's body positioned protectively. Ready, waiting. The castle loomed above them, silent, ancient, watching. And somewhere inside those stone walls, someone had just seen them. For the first time since beginning the climb, Jack understood one thing with absolute certainty. The castle wasn't abandoned, and whatever secrets it contained, someone was determined to keep them hidden. Jack Mercer remained motionless for several seconds, staring at the tower window where the mysterious figure had appeared. The mountain wind howled around him. Snow drifted across the ridge. Beside him, Shadow stood alert and silent. The figure never returned. Only the dark glass remained. Watching. Waiting. Jack slowly lowered his binoculars. Every instinct told him to leave. Years of military experience had taught him to respect unknown situations, unknown terrain, unknown people, unknown intentions. But another part of him, the part that had survived impossible missions and buried too many friends, needed answers. The castle had already become more than a curiosity. It had become a question he could not ignore. Shadow suddenly turned away from the fortress. The dog sniffed the air, then looked downhill toward the western valley. Jack frowned. What now? The shepherd started moving. Not toward the castle. Away from it, toward a distant road winding through the mountains. Jack followed. For nearly an hour they descended through thick forest. The castle gradually disappeared behind ridges and pines. Eventually, the trees opened. A small mountain town emerged below. The place looked frozen in another era. Weathered storefronts, wooden sidewalks, pickup trucks parked beside snowbanks, a church steeple rising above the rooftops. A faded sign welcomed visitors to Silver Creek. Population 614. The town rested in a narrow valley surrounded by mountains. Smoke curled from chimneys. The smell of wood fires drifted through the cold air. For the first time in weeks, Jack found himself surrounded by signs of ordinary life. Families, businesses, people. The sight felt strangely uncomfortable. Crowds had always bothered him since leaving the military. Even small crowds, even harmless ones. Too much noise, too many unknown variables. Too many reminders that he no longer fit into normal life. Shadow sensed the tension immediately. The dog moved closer. His shoulder brushed Jack's leg, grounding him, steadying him, as always. Together they entered town. A diner stood near the main intersection. Its windows glowed warmly against the winter afternoon. Jack pushed open the door. The smell of coffee and fresh bread greeted them. Conversations quieted briefly. Several customers looked up, then immediately noticed Shadow. People always noticed Shadow. The German shepherd carried himself with quiet authority. Even strangers recognized it. A waitress smiled. Service dog? Jack nodded. Retired military working dog. The woman's expression softened instantly. Coffee's on the house. Jack thanked her and found a booth near the window. Shadow settled beside him. Outside, snow continued falling gently across the street. For a while, Jack simply enjoyed the warmth, the normalcy, the sound of people living ordinary lives. Then he noticed something hanging on the far wall. A photograph. The castle. His eyes narrowed. The image showed the same stone fortress standing atop the mountain decades earlier. Jack stood and walked closer. The photograph appeared old. Very old. A small plaque beneath it read, Crow Castle, circa 1919. The name sent a ripple through his thoughts. Crow Castle. So it had a name, a history, a place in the local community. Most folks don't pay attention to that picture. A voice spoke behind him. Jack turned. A woman stood nearby holding a stack of books. Mid-30s, dark brown hair, intelligent eyes, a heavy winter coat dusted with snow. She noticed where he was looking. You're interested in the castle? It wasn't a question. Jack nodded. Do you know anything about it? The woman's expression immediately changed. Curiosity, recognition, maybe even excitement. Actually, I know quite a lot. She extended her hand. Rebecca Cole. Jack shook it. Jack Mercer. Her eyes briefly dropped toward Shadow. The German Shepherd remained calm, relaxed, no signs of concern, no warning signals. That alone caught Jack's attention. Shadow rarely trusted strangers, yet he seemed perfectly comfortable. Rebecca smiled. "And who's this handsome guy?" "Shadow?" The dog wagged his tail once. Rebecca laughed softly. "Well, Shadow has good taste. Most people in this town avoid talking about the castle." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Rebecca slid into the opposite booth. The excitement in her eyes became impossible to miss, because of the stories. Outside, the snow continued falling. Inside, the diner suddenly felt much smaller. Rebecca leaned forward. "Have you heard of Crow Castle before today?" Jack shook his head. "No. Most outsiders haven't." She glanced toward the photograph. "The castle has been sitting on that mountain for over a century." Jack listened carefully. Rebecca lowered her voice. "People have been disappearing around it for decades." The words hung in the air. Jack remained silent. She continued. "Not every year, not enough to make national news, but enough that locals notice." "Disappearances?" Rebecca nodded. "Hikers, hunters, prospectors, a few researchers." Shadow lifted his head, watching her, listening. Most were never found. Jack felt his pulse quicken. Rebecca pointed toward the photograph. "Some people believe the castle is cursed." Jack almost smiled. "Cursed?" "I didn't say I believe it." She laughed. "But mountain towns love legends." Her expression became more serious. "There are other stories." "What kind?" "Lights in the towers." Jack froze. Rebecca noticed. "You've seen them." It wasn't a question. Jack slowly nodded. The historian leaned back. "You're not the first." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Rebecca reached into her bag and removed a notebook. The pages were thick with handwritten notes, maps, sketches, photographs, years of research. "I've spent 6 years studying Crow Castle." Jack looked surprised. "Why?" Rebecca hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty crossed her face. "My father disappeared near that mountain when I was 12. Silence settled between them. The answer felt genuine, painful, real. "I never stopped looking for answers." Jack understood that feeling. Better than most. Rebecca continued. "The official report said he got lost during a snowstorm." She stared toward the castle photograph. "I never believed it." Something in her voice resonated with him. The need for closure, the refusal to let go, the determination to keep searching. Jack knew all of those things intimately. Rebecca closed the notebook. "If you're investigating the castle, I'd like to help." The offer surprised him. "Why?" "Because I've spent 6 years collecting pieces of a puzzle." She smiled faintly. "And maybe you've just found another piece." Shadow stood. The German Shepherd walked around the table. Jack watched carefully. The dog stopped beside Rebecca, then gently pressed his nose against her hand. Rebecca's eyes widened. "Well," she laughed softly, "I think I just passed an important test." Jack stared. Shadow trusted almost nobody, yet somehow the dog had accepted her immediately. That lowered his guard more than anything she could have said. Outside, evening shadows stretched across the valley. The mountains darkened. Far above them, hidden beyond clouds and snow, Crow Castle waited. The mystery had just become larger, and for the first time, Jack realized he wasn't chasing it alone. What neither he nor Shadow could possibly know was that Rebecca Cole would soon become one of the most important people in their journey, and one of the most dangerous. But for now, she looked like exactly what Jack needed: a friend, a guide, someone who might finally help him uncover the truth hidden inside the mountain castle. The truth that had been waiting for decades. The truth Shadow seemed determined to find. The following morning, Silver Creek woke beneath a blanket of fresh snow. Jack Mercer sat alone near the window of the small diner, nursing a cup of coffee while the town slowly came to life outside. Pickup trucks rolled down the main street. Shop owners shoveled sidewalks. Smoke drifted from chimneys into the pale winter sky. Across from him sat Rebecca Cole. Spread across the table were maps, photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes gathered over 6 years of research. Shadow lay beside Jack's chair. At first glance, he appeared relaxed, but every so often, the German shepherd would lift his head and stare toward the distant mountain. Toward Crow Castle, Rebecca noticed. He keeps doing that. Jack nodded. He hasn't stopped since we found the place. The historian studied Shadow thoughtfully. It's almost like he's trying to tell you something. Jack looked down at his old partner. The dog met his gaze briefly, then looked away. Back toward the mountain. Rebecca slid a photograph across the table. This was taken 23 years ago. Jack examined it. The image showed the castle from the air. Snow covered most of the structure. One tower appeared damaged. Another seemed partially rebuilt. What am I looking at? Rebecca pointed toward the western side. That section shouldn't exist. Jack frowned. What do you mean? The original architectural drawings don't show it. She opened a notebook. The castle has been modified repeatedly over the last 100 years. By who? That's the problem. Rebecca leaned back. No one knows. The answer lingered between them. By noon, they were climbing toward the castle together. The sky remained clear. The mountain air carried the sharp scent of pine and snow. Shadow led the way. The German shepherd moved with unusual purpose. Unlike previous hikes, he no longer seemed curious. He seemed focused, certain, as though he already knew where he needed to go. The higher they climbed, the more isolated the world became. Silver Creek disappeared below. Roads vanished. Civilization faded. Only the mountain remained, and the castle waiting above. 3 hours later, they reached the outer grounds. The fortress looked even larger than before. Stone walls towered over them. Ancient battlements stretched across the ridge. Dark windows stared outward like silent eyes. Rebecca stopped. For a moment, she simply looked. 6 years of searching. 6 years of stories. 6 years of unanswered questions. And now she finally stood before it. It's real, she whispered. Jack almost laughed. It definitely looks real. The main gate stood closed. Massive iron bars blocked entry. No guards, no signs, no visible activity. Yet the place felt occupied. Shadow approached the gate, sniffed once, then twice. A low growl escaped his throat. Jack immediately noticed. The dog's posture had changed. Every muscle tightened. The fur along his back rose slightly. What is it? Shadow ignored him. The shepherd turned away from the entrance and began walking along the outer wall. Jack and Rebecca followed. The stonework stretched for hundreds of feet. Snow covered much of the ground. The mountain dropped away sharply on one side. Clouds drifted through the valley below. Then Shadow stopped. The dog pressed his nose against the wall, sniffed intensely, and began scratching. Rebecca exchanged a glance with Jack. What's he doing? I don't know. The scratching intensified. Shadow focused on one specific section of stone. Again, and again, and again. Jack stepped closer. The wall looked ordinary, at least at first. Then he noticed something. One stone was newer, slightly different color, different texture. Someone had replaced it. Recently. Rebecca. She leaned forward. I see it. Together they examined the area. A narrow gap ran along one edge, barely visible. Jack inserted the blade of his pocket knife, pried carefully. The stone shifted. A hidden mechanism clicked somewhere inside the wall. Rebecca's eyes widened. No way. A section of stone slowly moved inward, revealing darkness beyond. Neither spoke. The mountain wind howled around them. Shadow immediately stepped through the opening, without hesitation, without fear. Jack activated his flashlight. The beam cut through dust and shadows. A narrow passage extended into the castle wall. Ancient stone surrounded them. The air smelled stale, undisturbed, forgotten. Rebecca followed close behind. This wasn't on any map. Jack wasn't surprised. The passage descended deeper. 20 feet. 30. 50. Then it opened into a hidden room. Silence filled the chamber. Dust covered everything. Shelves lined the walls. Boxes stacked floor to ceiling. A single table sat beneath a faded lantern. The place looked abandoned. Yet something felt wrong. Not old. Not ancient. Preserved. Deliberately hidden. Jack moved toward the nearest shelf. His flashlight illuminated dozens of photographs. Hundreds. Men, women, families, children. Each photograph carried a name and a date. Rebecca stepped closer. Her face paled. Jack. He already saw it. Missing persons. Dozens of them. Maybe more. The dates stretched back decades. The names came from different states, different towns, different lives. Yet all of them somehow connected to this mountain. A cold knot formed in Jack's stomach. Shadow wandered deeper into the chamber, then stopped beside a filing cabinet. The dog stared at it, waiting. Jack opened the drawer. Inside sat hundreds of folders, organized, cataloged, detailed. Rebecca pulled one free. Her hands trembled. The folder contained photographs, maps, witness statements, investigation notes. Everything connected to one missing hiker, a man who vanished 27 years earlier. Another file revealed a missing hunter. Then another, and another. Every folder told the same story. People disappeared. Investigations stalled. Cases closed. Questions unanswered. Jack looked around the room. This isn't a collection. Rebecca slowly nodded. It's a record. Neither liked what that implied. Shadow suddenly growled. The sound echoed through the chamber, low, uneasy. The shepherd had moved toward the far wall. Jack followed. The flashlight beam revealed more shelves, more files, and something else. Military records, classified markings, government documents, personnel photographs. Rebecca stared. What is all this? Jack pulled one folder free. Inside were surveillance images, coordinates, reports, monitoring logs. The contents made no sense, yet they all connected somehow. The room felt less like a secret archive, and more like evidence. Evidence someone never intended the world to see. Then Rebecca noticed something disturbing. Jack. He turned. She pointed toward several photographs hanging alone on the wall. Unlike the others, these images had been framed, protected, important. Jack walked closer. One photograph showed a group of men standing near the castle 50 years earlier. Another showed construction crews. A third displayed several vehicles parked outside the mountain. Then Jack froze. One face looked familiar. Not completely, but enough. Enough to trigger recognition. Enough to stir an old memory. He stepped closer. His pulse quickened. The man in the photograph resembled someone from his family. Not exactly, but close. Very close. Before he could examine it further, Shadow released another growl, this one louder, more urgent. The dog had moved toward the entrance, listening, alert. Someone else was nearby. Jack immediately understood. They were no longer alone inside the castle, and somewhere beyond the hidden chamber walls, footsteps echoed through the ancient stone corridors, slowly, deliberately, coming closer. The secrets hidden for decades had finally been discovered, but discovering them might have just placed all three of them in danger. The footsteps echoed through the hidden chamber, slow, measured, unhurried. Whoever was approaching wasn't sneaking. They weren't afraid. That somehow made it worse. Jack Mercer immediately shut the file drawer and motioned for Rebecca to step back. Years of SEAL training took over. His breathing slowed, his senses sharpened. Every possible exit, every defensive position, every threat. His mind cataloged them automatically. Shadow moved beside him. The German shepherd's ears remained locked toward the tunnel entrance. A low growl vibrated deep within his chest. The sound filled the chamber with warning. The footsteps stopped. Silence followed. Heavy silence. The kind that made every second feel longer than the last. Then a voice spoke from the darkness. Calm, controlled, unexpectedly polite. You've found something that wasn't meant to be found. Rebecca froze. Jack stepped slightly in front of her. Shadow remained motionless. Ready. Watching. The voice continued. Fortunately, curiosity isn't a crime. A tall figure emerged from the tunnel. The flashlight beam illuminated a man in his early 60s. Silver hair, dark wool coat, clean-shaven face, sharp blue eyes. He carried no visible weapon, no sign of panic, no sign of surprise. As if discovering strangers inside a hidden archive happened every day. The man stopped several feet away. His gaze moved from Jack to Rebecca, then settled on Shadow. Something flickered across his expression. Recognition. Respect. Military working dog. Jack said nothing. The man nodded slightly. I thought so. The stranger extended a hand. My name is Nathan Crow. The name immediately landed with weight. Rebecca inhaled sharply. Crow. The same name attached to the castle. The same name attached to decades of local legends. The same name whispered throughout Silver Creek. Jack didn't shake the offered hand. Not yet. Nathan didn't seem offended. Instead, he glanced around the chamber. I suppose explanations are overdue. Rebecca found her voice first. You're the owner. Nathan smiled faintly. Technically. The answer felt incomplete. Jack finally spoke. What exactly is this place? Nathan studied him carefully. For a moment it seemed as though he was deciding how much truth to reveal. Then his eyes shifted toward Shadow again. The dog had stopped growling. Not relaxed, but calmer. Observing. Evaluating. Nathan noticed. Interesting. Jack frowned. What? Nathan folded his hands. Most dogs dislike me immediately. Shadow remained silent. Nathan's smile widened slightly. Your partner appears undecided. Rebecca crossed her arms. Maybe he's smarter than the rest of us. Nathan actually laughed. A genuine laugh. Not mocking. Not threatening. Which somehow made the situation even stranger. Nothing about this man matched the image Jack had expected. There were no guards, no hostility, no intimidation. Just a calm older man standing inside a hidden chamber filled with secrets. Nathan looked toward the shelves. You've seen the files. Jack nodded. You've been tracking missing people. Nathan's expression changed. Not guilt, not fear. Sadness, brief but unmistakable. No. He looked at the photographs. I've been preserving them. The answer created more questions than it solved. Rebecca stepped forward. Preserving them from who? Nathan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward one of the shelves. His fingers brushed across a dusty photograph. When I was a boy, he said quietly, my father told me that some truths are dangerous. Jack remained skeptical. Nathan continued. Not dangerous because they're false. His eyes lifted. Dangerous because they're true. The room fell silent. Outside, distant wind moved through the mountain. Inside, tension thickened. Nathan suddenly turned toward the tunnel. Come. Jack didn't move. Neither did Rebecca. Nathan noticed, then nodded knowingly. Fair enough. He walked ahead anyway. Follow me if you want answers. For several seconds, nobody moved. Rebecca looked uncertain. Jack trusted almost nothing about the situation, yet curiosity pulled at him. More importantly, Shadow stood up. The German shepherd walked after Nathan, without hesitation. Jack stared. The dog wasn't relaxed, but he wasn't warning either. That mattered. A lot. Finally, Jack sighed. Guess we're doing this. They followed Nathan through a maze of stone corridors. The castle interior felt larger than it should have been. Ancient walls stretched endlessly. Hallways branched in multiple directions. Arched ceilings disappeared into shadows. The entire structure carried an atmosphere of forgotten history. Yet modern elements appeared everywhere. Security cameras, electrical wiring, steel doors, motion sensors. The contrast felt unsettling. The past and present woven together. Eventually, they emerged into a massive library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves covered the walls. A stone fireplace crackled near the center. Large windows overlooked the mountains. Snow drifted outside. The view was breathtaking. Nathan poured coffee from a silver kettle. Please. Neither Jack nor Rebecca accepted. Nathan shrugged. More for him. He sat beside the fireplace. For the first time, he looked older. Tired. Burdened. Not dangerous. Burdened. The distinction caught Jack off guard. Nathan studied the flames. You came here expecting a villain. No one responded. Nathan smiled sadly. Most people do. Rebecca finally spoke. Can you blame us? Nathan looked around the room, at the castle, at the mountain, at the hidden secrets beneath it. No. His answer carried surprising honesty. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the sun began descending behind distant peaks. Golden light spilled through the windows. The atmosphere shifted. The threat that had filled the hidden archive slowly faded. Not completely, but enough. Nathan set down his coffee. You should know something. Jack watched carefully. Nathan's voice lowered. There are people who would do almost anything to access what's hidden beneath this mountain. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. What exactly is hidden? Nathan stared into the flames. For a moment, his face seemed haunted. as though memories lived there, memories he wished he could forget. When he finally spoke, the words emerged slowly. My family inherited a responsibility. Jack immediately noticed the phrasing. Not wealth, not ownership. Responsibility. Nathan continued. We inherited secrets. The room became silent again. Outside, clouds drifted across the mountain peaks. Shadow remained near the fireplace, watching Nathan, listening. The German shepherd's posture had changed completely. No growling, no warning, only careful observation. Jack noticed, and it confused him. Everything about the castle suggested danger. Everything about the hidden files suggested danger. Yet Shadow no longer viewed Nathan as a threat. That realization unsettled Jack more than anything else, because Shadow was rarely wrong. Nathan looked toward the windows, toward the mountains stretching endlessly beyond. When my father died, he said quietly, he left me one instruction. His eyes returned to Jack. Protect what lies beneath this castle. Rebecca leaned forward. From who? Nathan's answer came immediately. Everyone. The fire snapped. A gust of wind rattled the glass. And for the first time since entering Crow Castle, Jack felt his assumptions beginning to crack. Maybe Nathan Crow wasn't the enemy. Maybe he wasn't the man hiding the truth. Maybe he was the man standing between the truth and something far worse. The possibility settled heavily over the room. Because if Nathan wasn't the villain, then someone else was. And neither Jack nor Rebecca had any idea who that might be. Yet. The fire burned low in the castle library. Outside, dusk settled over the Bitterroot Mountains. The last rays of sunlight painted the snow-covered peaks gold before surrendering to approaching darkness. Nathan Crow stood by the window. Silent, thoughtful, as though weighing how much truth he could safely reveal. Jack Mercer sat across from him. Years of military experience had taught him that people often revealed more through silence than words. Nathan's silence carried weight, the kind of weight that came from decades of responsibility, decades of secrets. Shadow lay near the fireplace, but unlike earlier, the German shepherd suddenly lifted his head. His ears rotated forward. Something had changed. Jack noticed immediately. The dog rose to his feet, then stared toward the far side of the library. Nathan followed his gaze. A faint smile touched the older man's face. So he hears it too. Jack frowned. Hears what? Nathan didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward a large wooden bookshelf built into the stone wall. The shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with old journals, maps, historical records, nothing unusual. At least until Nathan pressed his hand against a carved section near the bottom. A soft mechanical click echoed through the room. The entire bookshelf shifted. Rebecca gasped. A hidden doorway slowly appeared behind it. Darkness waited beyond. Shadow immediately stepped forward. The dog's attention sharpened, focused, intent. Nathan looked at Jack. I think your partner has been trying to find this since the moment he arrived. The statement sent a chill through Jack. Shadow had indeed been behaving strangely from the beginning, almost as if he sensed something beneath the castle. Something hidden, something important. Nathan activated a lantern mounted near the entrance. Soft light illuminated a descending stone staircase. The steps disappeared deep underground. Come with me. This time there was no hesitation. Jack followed, Rebecca close behind. Shadow led the way. The staircase spiraled downward for what felt like forever. Stone walls surrounded them. The temperature dropped noticeably. The deeper they descended, the older everything felt. Ancient. Forgotten. buried beneath generations of history. Eventually, the stairs ended. A massive underground corridor stretched before them. Rebecca stopped walking. Her eyes widened. "That's impossible." Jack couldn't disagree. The chamber was enormous, far larger than the castle itself should have allowed. Concrete walls extended into darkness. Steel support beams lined the ceiling. Electrical wiring ran through protective conduits. Industrial lighting illuminated the corridor. Nothing about it resembled the medieval architecture above. It looked modern, military, purpose-built. Nathan quietly watched their reactions. "Welcome to the real reason Crow Castle exists." The words echoed through the chamber. Jack slowly turned. "What is this place?" Nathan's answer came softly. "A secret." Shadow moved ahead. The German shepherd's nails clicked against the concrete floor. Unlike the castle above, the underground facility felt strangely familiar. Not comfortable, not safe, but familiar. Jack recognized the atmosphere immediately. Government construction, restricted facilities, military infrastructure. He had spent enough years around similar environments to know the signs. Rebecca walked beside him, completely speechless. The corridor eventually opened into a massive operations room. Rows of old equipment filled the space. Monitoring stations, storage cabinets, communication systems, maps covering entire walls. Most were decades old. Some appeared abandoned. Others looked surprisingly maintained. Dust covered certain areas, but not all. Nathan approached a large table. Spread across it were topographical maps of the Bitterroot region. Every mountain, every valley, every trail, documented in extraordinary detail. Jack studied them carefully, then noticed something disturbing. Red circles, dozens of them, scattered throughout the wilderness. "What are these?" Nathan's face darkened. "Observation points." Rebecca looked confused. "Observation points for what?" Nathan hesitated, then answered, "People." The room fell silent. Jack exchanged a glance with Rebecca. Neither liked the answer. Nathan continued. "For decades, activities throughout these mountains were monitored and recorded." The statement raised far more questions than it answered. Shadow suddenly changed direction. The German shepherd moved toward another hallway. Faster this time, purposefully, as though following a scent. Jack immediately followed. "Shadow." The dog didn't stop. Nathan watched with obvious curiosity. Rebecca hurried behind them. The hallway led deeper into the facility, past storage rooms, past maintenance areas, past sections that appeared sealed for years. Then Shadow froze. The German shepherd stood before a large steel door. His body became completely rigid, his nose pressed against the metal. Jack approached carefully. Something about the dog's reaction felt different, stronger, more personal. Nathan frowned. "I haven't opened that room in years." Jack looked at him. "Why?" Nathan seemed genuinely uncertain. "Because there was never a reason." Shadow scratched the door. Once, twice, then again. The same behavior that had led them to the hidden archive. The same behavior that always meant he had found something. Nathan retrieved an old key ring. After several attempts, one key finally turned the lock. The heavy door groaned open. Dust swirled into the corridor. The smell of old paper drifted outward. Jack entered first, then stopped. The room wasn't large, but what it contained stole the air from his lungs. Filing cabinets, storage boxes, photographs, personnel records. Everything carefully preserved. Everything carefully organized. and hanging on the far wall, a series of framed photographs. Shadow walked directly toward them. No hesitation, no uncertainty. The dog stopped before one specific frame, then sat down. Jack stepped closer. His heart began pounding. The photograph showed 6 men standing outside the castle decades earlier. Construction equipment surrounded them. Snow covered the mountain. The image had clearly been taken many years ago. Then Jack saw the name beneath the photograph. His entire body went still. Mercer. The name stared back at him. Mercer. His own surname. His breathing slowed. For several seconds he simply stared, unable to process what he was seeing. Rebecca approached quietly, then noticed the photograph. Oh my God. Jack barely heard her, because one of the men looked familiar. Not from memory, from family photographs, from childhood, from stories told long ago. The resemblance was undeniable. The man in the photograph was his grandfather. Nathan stepped closer. His expression changed immediately. Recognition, surprise, understanding. So that's why. Jack turned. What? Nathan looked at Shadow, then back at the photograph. That's why your dog led you here. The words landed like a physical blow. Jack stared at him. What are you talking about? Nathan pointed toward the image. Your grandfather worked here. Silence. Absolute silence. Even Rebecca stopped breathing. Jack looked back at the photograph. His grandfather had disappeared 30 years earlier. The family never received answers. No body, no explanation, nothing. Only questions. Questions that had haunted generations. Now those questions were staring back at him from the wall, inside a hidden chamber beneath a mountain castle. Shadow remained seated beneath the photograph, watching, waiting, as if he had known all along that this was what they were meant to find. For the first time since arriving at Crow Castle, Jack felt the mystery become personal. No longer about missing hikers, no longer about local legends, no longer about hidden archives. Now it was about his family, his blood, his grandfather. And somewhere within the countless files stored beneath the mountain, the answers were waiting. But Jack had no idea that those answers would soon overturn everything he believed about the castle, everything he believed about Nathan Crow, and everything he believed about the truth hidden beneath the mountain. Jack Mercer stood frozen before the photograph. The underground room felt smaller now, the air heavier, the world quieter. His grandfather's face stared back at him from beneath decades of dust. Not a resemblance, not a possibility. It was him. The same eyes Jack remembered from faded family albums. The same square jaw, the same calm expression. For 30 years, the Mercer family had lived with unanswered questions. One day his grandfather had simply vanished. No body, no explanation, no final goodbye. Now Jack had found him again, in a photograph hidden beneath a mountain castle. Shadow remained seated beneath the frame, still, patient, almost proud, as if he had completed the first part of a mission. Rebecca stepped closer. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Jack. He couldn't answer. Too many emotions collided at once. Shock, confusion, hope, anger, questions. Nathan Crow quietly approached one of the filing cabinets. Without speaking, he opened a drawer and removed a thick folder. The cover carried a single name. Thomas Mercer, Jack's grandfather. Nathan handed it over. For a moment, Jack simply stared at it. Then he opened the file. Inside were photographs, reports, letters, maps, documents stretching across decades, evidence of an entire life hidden from public view. The first page contained an identification photograph. Below it, Thomas Mercer, Project Operations Supervisor. Jack frowned. Project? Nathan sighed. The same question I asked when my father first showed me these records. The older man looked toward the shelves, toward the mountains hidden beyond layers of rock and stone. Then he finally spoke. My family didn't build this place. The words echoed through the chamber. Rebecca looked confused. What do you mean? Nathan leaned against a desk. His face carried the exhaustion of someone who had repeated this story many times in his own mind. People assume the Crow family created everything. He gestured around the underground complex. The castle, the files, the monitoring stations, the secrecy. His eyes settled on Jack. We didn't. Silence filled the room. Nathan continued. The castle was already here. Rebecca blinked. Already here? Nathan nodded. My grandfather purchased the property after World War II. The statement immediately captured their attention. He thought he was buying an abandoned historical site. Nathan smiled sadly. He was wrong. The underground lights hummed softly overhead. Far above them, the castle stood against the mountain sky. Below it, history waited. Nathan walked toward an old wall map. One section had been covered with notes, coordinates, dates, photographs. During the Cold War, government contractors leased portions of the mountain. Jack listened carefully. Every instinct told him the next part mattered. Nathan pointed toward several marked locations. They conducted research. What kind of research? Rebecca asked. Nathan hesitated. The pause felt significant. Then he answered carefully. The kind that governments preferred not to discuss publicly. The room grew quiet. No dramatic revelations, no wild conspiracy, just a simple truth. Some operations had remained classified. Some projects had been buried, and some secrets had stayed hidden. Nathan's voice lowered. Most of the records are incomplete, but we know enough. Jack finally spoke. What happened? Nathan looked directly at him. Witnesses happened. The answer sent a chill through the room. Nathan continued. People discovered things they weren't supposed to discover. Rebecca folded her arms. The missing hikers. Nathan nodded. Some. The hunters? Some. The disappearances? Nathan looked away. His expression darkened. Not all of them. The answer was honest, painfully honest, and that honesty made Jack trust him more than he wanted to. Nathan walked toward another cabinet. From inside, he removed several photographs. They showed old construction crews, research teams, engineers, security personnel. Among them stood Thomas Mercer, Jack's grandfather, again and again, year after year. The realization hit hard. His grandfather hadn't wandered into the mystery. He had been part of it. Nathan placed one photograph on the table. This was taken 6 months before he disappeared. Jack stared. His grandfather looked older, more tired, yet determined, as though carrying a burden. Nathan pointed toward another figure in the image. My father. The two men stood side by side, working together. Jack looked up. You knew him? Nathan nodded slowly. I was young, but I remember him. Jack swallowed. What was he like? Nathan smiled. The first genuine smile Jack had seen from him. Honorable. The answer came immediately. Without hesitation, he believed some things were worth protecting. Jack felt something tighten inside his chest, because that sounded exactly like the man he remembered. The room fell silent again. Then Shadow suddenly stood. His ears pointed toward another corridor. The German shepherd had detected something. Again. Nathan noticed. "What is it, boy?" Shadow moved away from the group. Not alarmed, focused. The same behavior that had led them to every discovery so far. Jack followed. Rebecca followed. Nathan followed. The corridor ended at a smaller archive room. Dust covered everything. Boxes lined the shelves. Most appeared untouched for years. Shadow walked directly toward a metal cabinet, then stopped. His nose pressed against one drawer. Jack opened it. Inside sat dozens of journals. Personal journals. Not official records. Handwritten. Private. Rebecca carefully lifted the first one. The cover contained a familiar name. Thomas Mercer, Jack's grandfather. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The significance was obvious. These weren't government documents. These were personal observations, personal thoughts, personal truths. Nathan looked stunned. "I didn't know these existed." Jack opened the first journal. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. The first page contained a date, then a sentence. Just one sentence. But it changed everything. If anyone ever reads this, the mountain must never lose its truth. Jack stared, then read it again. Rebecca leaned closer. Neither spoke. Because suddenly, the mystery wasn't about secrets being hidden. It was about secrets being protected. The distinction changed everything. Nathan quietly lowered himself into a nearby chair. For the first time since meeting him, he looked relieved. Not because answers had been found, but because someone else finally understood the burden. Jack slowly closed the journal. His eyes drifted toward Shadow. The dog sat calmly beside the cabinet, watching, waiting. Almost as if he knew this discovery mattered. Outside, darkness settled across the Bitterroot Mountains. Snow began falling again. The castle stood against the night sky. Silent, ancient, guarding its secrets. But something had changed. The villain Jack expected to find wasn't standing beside him. Nathan Crow wasn't protecting himself. He wasn't protecting wealth. He wasn't protecting power. He was protecting history. And for the first time, Jack realized the mountain wasn't hiding the truth. It was preserving it. Neither he nor Rebecca noticed the brief expression that crossed her face as she stared at the journals. A flash of calculation, a spark of interest. Gone almost instantly. Too brief for anyone to question. Too brief for anyone to suspect. But the first crack in the truth had already appeared. And somewhere deep inside the castle, another secret was waiting. One that would soon change everything all over again. Snow fell steadily outside Crow Castle. The storm wrapped itself around the mountain like a white curtain, isolating the ancient fortress from the rest of the world. Deep beneath the castle, Jack Mercer sat alone at a wooden table inside the archive room. One of his grandfather's journals lay open before him. The pages were yellow with age. The handwriting remained steady, disciplined, familiar. Every sentence felt like a voice reaching across decades. Shadow rested beside him. The German shepherd had finally relaxed. For the first time since discovering the castle, the dog seemed calm. Not happy, not content, but satisfied, as though he had completed a mission nobody else understood. Jack carefully turned another page. His grandfather's words described the mountain, the facility, the responsibility entrusted to a small group of people. Again and again one phrase appeared: protect the truth. Not hide it, not bury it, protect it. The distinction mattered. Across the room, Nathan Crow organized several old records. Rebecca sat nearby reviewing maps and documents. At least she appeared to be. Every so often, Jack noticed her attention drifting elsewhere, toward certain file cabinets, toward inventory records, toward lists of archived materials. At the time, he thought nothing of it. His focus remained on the journal. Hours passed. Outside, darkness deepened. The storm intensified. The castle groaned softly beneath the weight of wind and snow. Eventually, Nathan stood. "I'm going to check the generators." Jack nodded. The older man left through a side corridor. A few minutes later, Rebecca closed her notebook. "I need some air." Jack glanced up. "Inside a mountain?" She laughed softly. "You know what I mean." Shadow briefly lifted his head as she walked away, then lowered it again. The moment passed. At least it seemed to. Jack returned to the journal. The next entry stopped him cold. A name. Not Nathan Crow. Not anyone from the government records. A different name. A private collector. Someone who had spent years trying to gain access to the archive. The entry described repeated attempts to purchase documents, artifacts, historical evidence. The collector had offered enormous amounts of money. His grandfather had refused every time. Jack frowned. The journal continued. Some people seek history. Others seek ownership. The mountain must never belong to the second kind. Jack sat back thoughtfully. Something about the passage bothered him, not because it was confusing, because it suddenly felt relevant, very relevant. At that exact moment, Shadow stood. The movement was immediate, sharp, purposeful. Jack looked down. The dog wasn't calm anymore. His ears pointed forward. His body had become rigid. Every muscle tightened. Jack recognized the change instantly. Danger. Not physical danger. Something else, something wrong. "What is it?" Shadow turned toward the corridor Rebecca had used earlier. Then he began walking. Fast. Jack stood. Shadow. The dog didn't stop. His pace increased. The shepherd moved through the underground corridors with growing urgency. Jack followed. A knot formed in his stomach. The same feeling he experienced before operations overseas, when instincts noticed something before logic could explain it. The corridor split several times. Shadow never hesitated. Left, right, down another hallway, then another. The deeper they went, the older the facility became. Storage rooms, archives, maintenance tunnels, areas untouched for years. Finally, Shadow stopped outside a secured records room. The heavy steel door stood partially open. Jack frowned. He remembered it being closed. The German shepherd pushed inside. Jack followed. The room was empty. Rows of shelves stretched into darkness. Storage crates lined the walls. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Then Jack noticed a cabinet standing open. Files scattered across the floor. Several storage boxes partially emptied. His pulse quickened. "Rebecca?" No answer. Shadow moved deeper into the room, then stopped. His nose pressed against the concrete floor, following a scent. Jack immediately understood. The dog wasn't searching randomly. He was tracking someone, tracking Rebecca. The realization hit him harder than expected. No. That couldn't be right. Rebecca had helped them. She had spent years researching the castle. She had shared her father's story, her questions, her pain. None of it felt fake. Yet Shadow continued tracking, room after room, hallway after hallway. The evidence became harder to ignore. Eventually, Jack reached a secondary archive chamber. The door stood open. Inside, several empty cases lay on a table, protective storage containers designed for preserving historical records, now empty. Jack slowly walked forward. Then he saw it. A backpack. Rebecca's backpack. Open. Inside were documents, photographs, maps, and a satellite phone. His stomach dropped. A satellite phone. Not something a small-town historian casually carried, Shadow growled. The low sound echoed through the room. Jack opened another compartment. Inside sat multiple hard drives, portable scanners, data storage devices, professional equipment, not research tools, extraction tools. The truth arrived all at once, fast, brutal, unavoidable. The stories, the friendship, the years of research, the emotional connection. Everything suddenly looked different. Every conversation, every question, every coincidence. Jack's chest tightened. No. But deep down he already knew. The sound of footsteps interrupted the silence. Jack turned. Rebecca stood in the doorway. For several seconds, nobody moved. Snow swirled through a ventilation shaft somewhere above. The room felt frozen. Rebecca looked at Shadow first, then Jack. A sad smile touched her face. Of course he figured it out. Jack stared at her. "Tell me I'm wrong." She didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. The disappointment hit harder than anger, much harder, because trust had become rare in Jack's life, and he had trusted her. Rebecca slowly stepped into the room. Her shoulders slumped slightly, almost regretful. Almost. "I didn't want it to happen like this." Jack laughed once, without humor. "How exactly did you want it to happen?" She looked away. For the first time, the warmth she usually carried disappeared completely. In its place stood someone colder, more calculating, more focused. The archive contains information worth millions. The words echoed through the chamber. There it was, the truth. Rebecca continued. Private collections, museums, historical buyers, research organizations. People would pay anything. Jack shook his head. So that's what this was. It started that way. The answer came quietly. Dangerously quietly. Rebecca's eyes briefly softened. You were never supposed to matter. Jack felt something break inside him. Not dramatically, not loudly. Just a small fracture where trust used to live. Shadow moved beside him, protective, silent, watching her carefully. Rebecca noticed. The sadness in her expression deepened. He really loves you. Jack didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. The trusted ally, the woman who had shared their journey, the woman Shadow had accepted, the woman who seemed to understand loss, had been searching for the archive all along, and now the mountain's greatest secret wasn't hidden beneath stone walls. It stood right in front of them. Wearing the face of a friend, the betrayal hurt because it was real. And somewhere behind Rebecca's eyes, Jack could see something else. Desperation. The kind that made people dangerous. The kind that meant this story was far from over. In fact, it was only getting started. For several seconds, nobody moved. The underground archive remained silent except for the faint hum of old ventilation systems. Rebecca Cole stood near the doorway. Jack Mercer stood beside Shadow. Between them sat decades of secrets. Trust had already been shattered. Now something far more dangerous was taking its place. Desperation. Rebecca looked exhausted. Not frightened. Not ashamed. Exhausted. As if years of chasing the castle had finally reached their conclusion. You don't understand, she said quietly. Jack's voice remained steady. Then help me understand. Rebecca laughed bitterly. Do you know what it's like spending your entire life looking for answers? The question landed harder than she intended. Because Jack did know. He knew what it felt like to lose someone, to spend years carrying unanswered questions, to chase ghosts. Rebecca shook her head. My father disappeared on this mountain. Her eyes glistened. For 12 years, everyone treated me like a child chasing fairy tales. She pointed toward the archive. Then I found proof. Shadow remained motionless, watching, waiting. Rebecca continued. People said I was obsessed. Maybe they were right. Jack noticed something changing in her expression. The grief was real. The pain was real. But somewhere along the way, something else had grown beside it. Greed. Obsession. A need to possess the truth instead of protect it. The same danger his grandfather had written about. Rebecca took a step backward, toward the storage shelves, toward a large equipment case. Jack immediately noticed. So did Shadow. The German shepherd's posture stiffened. Rebecca. She stopped. For one brief moment, Jack thought she might surrender, might choose reason, might choose honesty. Instead, she smiled sadly. I'm sorry. The words echoed through the chamber. Then everything happened at once. Rebecca grabbed the equipment case, spun, and ran. Shadow exploded into motion. The German shepherd launched forward instantly, not attacking, not aggressive, intercepting, blocking. Rebecca darted through a side doorway and disappeared into the maze of underground corridors. Jack cursed and followed. The chase carried them deep into the hidden facility. Hallways flashed past, storage rooms, generator chambers, abandoned offices. Rebecca knew exactly where she was going. That realization bothered Jack more than anything else. She had studied the castle long before meeting him, long before Silver Creek, long before the diner. This wasn't an impulsive betrayal. It had been planned, carefully, patiently. Ahead, Rebecca disappeared around another corner. Shadow stayed on her scent. The German shepherd moved with incredible speed despite his age. Years of military training still lived inside him. Years of tracking. Years of finding people. Years of refusing to quit. The facility seemed endless. Corridors stretched in every direction. Some sections remained abandoned. Others appeared strangely active. Lights flickered overhead. Machines hummed behind sealed doors. The mountain itself seemed alive around them. Then a loud metallic crash echoed through the complex. Jack stopped. The sound had come from somewhere ahead. A second later, emergency alarms suddenly activated. Red warning lights flashed. A low siren echoed through the underground structure. Shadow immediately turned toward the noise. Jack's pulse quickened. Something was wrong. Very wrong. They rounded another corner. Rebecca stood inside a large storage chamber. Several metal cabinets had toppled over. Documents littered the floor. Maps, photographs, records, decades of history scattered everywhere. Nathan Crow arrived seconds later from another corridor. His face drained of color immediately. No. The single word carried genuine fear. Jack looked around. What happened? Nathan wasn't looking at Rebecca. He was staring at the damaged wall behind her. A series of old electrical panels had been exposed. Sparks jumped between damaged wires. Tiny flames appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. The older man's expression tightened. The backup power grid. Rebecca looked shocked. This wasn't supposed to happen. Nathan spun toward her. What did you do? For the first time since meeting him, real anger entered his voice. Rebecca stepped backward. I just needed access to the storage systems. The sparks intensified. One panel exploded with a sharp crack. Everyone flinched. Smoke began rising toward the ceiling. Shadow barked. A rare sound. Urgent. Warning. Danger. Nathan immediately moved toward the control panels. The flames spread faster than anyone expected. Years of dry insulation and aging equipment created perfect conditions. Not an explosion. Not some dramatic catastrophe. Just an old system finally failing under stress. Yet inside a mountain, even a small fire could become deadly. Smoke started filling the chamber. Rebecca stared at the growing flames. For the first time, she looked genuinely frightened. Nathan grabbed a fire extinguisher. The equipment sputtered weakly, then died. Too old, too damaged. The realization hit everyone simultaneously. This facility had survived decades, but not this. The fire spread along wiring conduits. Small flames raced through ceiling channels. Emergency lights flickered violently. Jack's military instincts took over. Everybody move. Nathan didn't argue. Smoke thickened rapidly. The group retreated into the corridor. Behind them, the storage room continued burning. Shadow remained close to Jack's side. The German shepherd repeatedly glanced behind them. Monitoring, assessing, protecting. Then the mountain shook. A deep rumble echoed through the underground chambers. Dust fell from the ceiling. Everyone froze. The fire had reached structural support systems, not enough to destroy the castle, but enough to create danger. Nathan looked horrified. We have to get out. Another rumble answered him. Louder this time. The facility groaned. Jack pushed forward. The corridor ahead twisted through the mountain. Visibility worsened by the second. Smoke rolled along the ceiling. The emergency lighting faded. Darkness advanced. Then disaster struck. A support beam overhead snapped. The sound was deafening. Jack looked up just as several heavy sections of debris collapsed into the corridor. He shoved Nathan aside. The older man stumbled clear. Shadow jumped backward. But Jack wasn't fast enough. The beam crashed down. Pain exploded through his shoulder. The impact knocked him to the ground. The world blurred. Dust filled the air. Voices echoed distantly. Somewhere nearby, Rebecca shouted something. Nathan yelled his name. Shadow barked repeatedly. Jack tried to stand. Couldn't. The beam pinned part of his body beneath rubble. His shoulder screamed with pain. Smoke drifted through the corridor. Darkness closed in around the edges of his vision. For one terrifying moment, another memory surfaced. Not the war, not Hannah, his grandfather, the hidden photograph, the journals, the mystery. A man who disappeared beneath this mountain. A man who never came home. Jack stared into the smoke. A terrible thought entered his mind. Maybe this was how it happened. Maybe this was exactly how his grandfather died. Alone, buried, forgotten beneath stone and secrets. The realization struck harder than the injury, and for the first time since discovering Crow Castle, Jack Mercer genuinely believed he might never leave the mountain alive. Smoke rolled through the corridor in thick gray waves. The emergency lights flickered weakly overhead. Dust filled the air. Every breath burned. Jack lay trapped beneath the collapsed support beam, his shoulder pinned under a crushing weight of wood, steel, and broken concrete. Pain pulsed through his body. Sharp, relentless. The mountain groaned around him. Somewhere deeper in the facility, another section collapsed with a distant crash. Nathan Crow dropped beside him immediately. "Jack, I'm here." The words came out strained, barely audible. Rebecca stood several feet away, her face pale beneath the flashing emergency lights. For a moment, The conflict that had divided them seemed meaningless compared to the danger surrounding them all. The mountain no longer cared who was right or wrong. It threatened everyone equally. Shadow barked sharply. The German shepherd raced around the debris pile, searching, analyzing, working, the same way he had done during military deployments years ago. Jack recognized the behavior instantly. The dog wasn't panicking. He was solving a problem. Nathan grabbed the beam, pulled. Nothing moved. The structure remained locked in place. Smoke thickened. Visibility worsened. Rebecca joined him. Together they tried again. The beam shifted slightly, then settled back into place. Not enough. Nowhere near enough. Jack knew it. Nathan knew it. Rebecca knew it. The weight was simply too great. Another tremor shook the facility. More dust rained from the ceiling. Nathan looked upward. Fear flashed across his face. "We don't have much time." Shadow suddenly disappeared. The German shepherd sprinted down a side corridor. Gone. Jack stared after him. No. The word escaped before he could stop it. For a terrifying second, an impossible thought entered his mind. What if Shadow finally chose survival? What if instinct overpowered loyalty? What if the dog escaped while he still could? The thought lasted less than a heartbeat, because Jack immediately hated himself for thinking it. Shadow had never abandoned him. Not once. Not in combat. Not after Hannah died. Not during homelessness. Not during panic attacks. Not ever. Still. The corridor remained empty. The dog did not return. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time felt strange beneath the rubble. The fire continued spreading somewhere beyond the walls. The air grew hotter, harder to breathe. Jack closed his eyes briefly. Memories surfaced unexpectedly. Hannah laughing on their ranch porch, sunset over Montana fields, Shadow racing through tall grass, the smell of fresh coffee in the morning. Simple things. Beautiful things. Things he'd lost. Things he'd spent years mourning. Nathan's voice cut through the memories. "Stay with us." Jack opened his eyes. The older man's face appeared blurry through smoke. "I'm trying." Rebecca looked toward another corridor. "We need another way." Nathan nodded grimly. "There might be emergency exits." Might? This facility was built decades ago. The uncertainty wasn't comforting. Another section of ceiling collapsed somewhere nearby. A cloud of dust surged through the hallway. Rebecca coughed violently. Nathan pulled a handkerchief over his mouth. Jack's vision blurred again. His injured shoulder throbbed. The world seemed to tilt. Then a sound echoed through the corridor. Barking. Distant. Repeated. Nathan looked up. Rebecca froze. Jack's heart jumped. Shadow. The barking came again, from somewhere deeper inside the mountain. Not random. Purposeful. Calling. Leading. Jack smiled despite the pain. That's him. Nathan listened carefully. The barking continued, then stopped, then started again. Always from the same direction. Rebecca understood first. He's trying to show us something. Nathan stood, without hesitation. I'm following him. The older man disappeared into the smoke. Rebecca followed. Jack remained trapped beneath the beam, alone. The minutes that followed felt endless. Smoke drifted lower. The emergency lights dimmed further. Silence returned. Then footsteps. Nathan emerged from the darkness, his face covered with soot, his eyes wide with disbelief. We found it. Jack blinked. Found what? An escape route. Hope exploded through the corridor. Nathan knelt beside him. Shadow found a tunnel. Of course he did. Jack almost laughed. Even now. Even here. The dog refused to quit. Rebecca returned carrying a metal jack taken from an old maintenance room. Together, she and Nathan positioned it beneath the collapsed beam. The device creaked, strained. Slowly, the weight began lifting. Not much, just enough. Jack gritted his teeth. Pain shot through his shoulder. But he could move. A little. Then more. Another turn. Another inch. Another painful breath. Finally, Nathan shouted, "Now!" Jack pulled himself free. Agony exploded through his arm. Yet he was free. Actually free. Shadow appeared seconds later. The German Shepherd emerged from the smoke-covered corridor. His coat was coated with dust. His paws scraped against the concrete floor. He looked exhausted. But his tail wagged once. Just once. Jack dropped to one knee, wrapped his good arm around the dog. For a brief moment, everything else disappeared. The fire, the betrayal, the mountain. None of it mattered. Only this. Man and dog, together, again. Shadow licked his face, then immediately turned toward the tunnel. Business first. Always. The escape route wound deep beneath the mountain, far older than the facility itself. Stone walls surrounded them. Natural cave formations mixed with man-made passages. Ancient engineering hidden beneath generations of secrets. The air grew cooler, cleaner. Fresh currents drifted through the darkness. Shadow led the way. Always ahead. Always checking. Always returning to make sure Jack remained behind him. The German Shepherd's training seemed almost supernatural now. Every fork, every junction, every choice. He selected correctly, again and again. Hours passed, or perhaps less. Nobody knew anymore. Time disappeared inside the tunnels. Only survival mattered. Jack's injury slowed them. Nathan frequently supported him. Even Rebecca helped, despite everything that had happened. No one mentioned the betrayal, not now. The mountain demanded unity, nothing else. Then disaster nearly struck again. A section of tunnel partially collapsed behind them. The thunderous crash echoed endlessly through the caves. Dust surged forward. Darkness swallowed everything. Jack turned immediately. "Shadow!" No answer. The dog was gone. The tunnel ahead stood empty. Silence. Terrible silence. Rebecca stared. Nathan froze. Jack's heart stopped. The collapse had separated them. Or worse. For several horrifying seconds, no one spoke. Jack stepped forward, ignoring the pain, ignoring reason. "Shadow!" His voice echoed through the darkness. Nothing. Again. "Shadow!" Still nothing. The silence felt unbearable. The dog had saved him, led them, protected them. And now he was gone. Jack felt something break inside him. Not fear, not grief, something deeper. The possibility of losing the last family he had left. Then, from somewhere ahead, a bark echoed through the tunnel. One bark, strong, alive. Jack nearly collapsed with relief. A second bark followed, closer, then another. The German Shepherd emerged from the darkness moments later, covered in dust, tired, but standing. Standing and leading, as if nothing could stop him. Nathan laughed openly. Rebecca wiped tears from her eyes. Even Jack smiled, the kind of smile that comes only after believing you've lost something forever. Shadow trotted forward, then turned, waiting. The message was obvious. "Follow me. One final time." The tunnel began sloping upward. Fresh air strengthened. Natural light appeared ahead, faint at first, then brighter. Hope surged through the group. The exit. They were close, very close, and at the front of it all walked an aging military dog who refused to leave anyone behind. A dog whose final mission was becoming something far greater than survival. He wasn't just leading them out of the mountain. He was leading Jack toward a future he thought he'd lost forever. Neither of them knew it yet. But sunrise was waiting on the other side. The tunnel continued climbing. Fresh air flowed through the darkness. With every step, the smell of smoke faded behind them. The mountain no longer felt like a prison. It felt like something releasing its grip. Shadow led the way. His pace had slowed. The aging German shepherd's movements carried the exhaustion of a warrior who had given everything he had left. Yet he never stopped. Not once. Not until a faint glow appeared ahead. Natural light. Morning light, hope. The tunnel opened onto a rocky hillside several miles from Crow Castle. For a moment, nobody moved. Jack Mercer stood in silence. The cold mountain air filled his lungs. Clean, fresh, alive. After hours trapped beneath the mountain, the open sky felt almost unreal. The eastern horizon glowed gold. The first rays of sunrise touched the snow-covered peaks. Far in the distance, Crow Castle stood against the dawn, scarred, weathered, still standing. Smoke drifted from portions of the mountain, but the fire had largely burned itself out deep within the underground facility. Nathan Crow sank onto a nearby boulder, exhausted. Rebecca remained several feet away, silent. Her face revealed nothing. Shadow finally lay down beside Jack. The dog rested his head on his paws. For the first time since the journey began, he looked old. Not weak, not broken, simply tired. Jack knelt beside him. His injured shoulder throbbed, but he barely noticed. His hand rested gently on Shadow's neck. "Good job, partner." The German shepherd's tail moved once, slowly, content. The moment might have lasted forever, but the distant sound of helicopters shattered the silence. Everyone looked up. 2 aircraft appeared beyond the mountains, then another, and another. Jack frowned. Nathan suddenly smiled, a genuine smile. The first truly relaxed expression Jack had seen from him. "They're here." Minutes later, the helicopters grew closer. Search and rescue markings covered one aircraft. Federal agency insignias marked another. Soon the mountainside filled with activity. Personnel moved quickly but professionally. Medical teams, investigators, communications specialists. The response was massive, far larger than Jack expected. One man separated himself from the others. Mid-40s, athletic build, dark jacket, confident posture. The kind of confidence that came from years of experience. He approached Nathan first, then Jack. "Nathan Crow." Nathan nodded. The man extended a hand. "Agent Daniel Foster." Jack immediately recognized the title. Federal investigator. Agent Foster turned toward him. "You must be Jack Mercer." Jack nodded cautiously. The agent smiled. "I've heard quite a bit about you." The statement felt strange. Jack had no idea who this man was. Yet Agent Foster seemed unsurprised by anything happening around him. As medical personnel examined Jack's shoulder, the investigator gathered everyone nearby, including Rebecca, including Nathan, including Shadow. What happened next changed everything one final time. Agent Foster opened a secure case. Inside were documents, photographs, investigation records, years of them. The operation beneath Crow Castle has been under investigation for a long time. Jack listened carefully. The investigator continued, much longer than most people realize. Rebecca's expression tightened slightly, almost imperceptibly. But Jack noticed. Agent Foster glanced toward Nathan. The Crow family has cooperated with federal authorities for decades. Jack blinked. What? Nathan lowered his eyes. The investigator nodded. It's true. The mountains suddenly seemed very quiet. Agent Foster opened another file. Your grandfather helped establish part of that cooperation. Jack froze. The words hit harder than expected. My grandfather? The agent handed him a sealed envelope. Old, yellowed, worn by time. Across the front, a name had been written decades earlier. For whoever finds this after me. Jack's hands trembled slightly. He recognized the handwriting instantly. Thomas Mercer, his grandfather. The world seemed to narrow around that single envelope. The helicopters, the investigators, the mountains. Everything faded away. Only the letter remained. Slowly, carefully, Jack opened it. Inside waited several handwritten pages. The first line stole his breath. If you are reading this, then the mountain finally chose to reveal its truth. Jack swallowed hard. The handwriting remained steady throughout. His grandfather explained everything. Not every detail, not every secret, just the parts that mattered. He described how a small group of caretakers had chosen to preserve records rather than destroy them. How protecting truth sometimes required silence. How some discoveries belonged to future generations. And finally, near the end, one sentence stopped Jack completely. Courage is not measured by war. It is measured by protecting what is right when nobody is watching. Tears filled his eyes. Not from grief, not entirely, from understanding. For years he had believed his grandfather vanished, disappeared, failed to come home. Now he understood. The man had chosen purpose, chosen duty, chosen something larger than himself, the same choice Jack had spent his entire life making. Beside him, Shadow rested quietly, as if the dog somehow understood the importance of the moment. Agent Foster finally turned toward Rebecca. The atmosphere changed immediately. The warmth vanished. Professionalism replaced it. Rebecca looked away. She already knew. The investigation, the archives, the years of searching. Everything had finally caught up to her. She offered no resistance, no arguments, only silence. Because somewhere along the way, her search for answers had become a search for ownership, and she knew it. Nathan watched sadly. Jack felt no victory, only disappointment. The mountain had exposed everyone's truth, not just hers. Weeks became months. Winter slowly gave way to spring. Snow melted from the peaks. Wildflowers returned to the valleys. The world moved forward, and so did Jack. Federal teams secured Crow Castle. Historians arrived. Researchers arrived. Veteran organizations became involved. The mountain's secrets were finally preserved the way they had always been intended. Not hidden, protected. The castle itself underwent restoration. Carefully, respectfully, its purpose transformed. The old fortress became something new, a memorial, a training center, a place dedicated to veterans and working dogs who had served their country. When officials offered Jack a position as caretaker and security director, he accepted. Not because he needed a job, though he did. Not because he needed a home, though he did. But because for the first time in years, he felt something he thought he had lost forever. Purpose. Months later, Jack stood atop the mountain overlooking the Bitterroot Wilderness. The sunrise painted the sky gold and orange. Below him, Crow Castle gleamed in the morning light. Beautiful, peaceful, alive. Shadow sat beside him. Older now, slower, but still watching the horizon with the same loyal eyes. Jack smiled. His hand rested on the German shepherd's shoulder, the same shoulder that had stood beside him through war, through grief, through homelessness, through every battle life had thrown at them. For a long moment, neither moved. The mountain breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. The future stretched before them, bright and open. Then Jack finally understood something. Shadow had never led him to treasure, never led him to money, never led him to power. The castle wasn't the reward. The secrets weren't the reward. Even the letter wasn't the reward. The real inheritance had been something far more valuable. A second chance. A reason to keep going. A place to belong. A home. Shadow looked up at him. Jack smiled. Yeah. The dog wagged his tail once, slowly, knowingly. As the sun rose over the mountains, man and dog stood together above the castle, not as survivors, not as heroes, but as family. And after everything they had lost, that was more than enough. The mountain kept its truth. The castle found its purpose, and the homeless Navy SEAL finally found his way home. The castle found its purpose, and the homeless Navy SEAL finally found his way home. If you believe loyalty is worth more than money, comment yes below. And if a dog has ever stood by you through a hard time, tell us your story. We'd love to hear it. In the end, the greatest treasures aren't hidden in mountains. They're the people and companions who never give up on us. Subscribe and join us for more powerful stories of courage, dignity, second chances, and the unbreakable bond between veterans and their loyal dogs.